You're about to hear a clip from one of our Patreon exclusive episodes. To hear the entire episode, sign up now at patreon.com/Jenkins and Jones.
Chris, before we get out of here, it would be, I feel like it'd be a mistake to have on Chris Long's former, NFL star and not talk about this NFLPA situation. I know you've been talking about it on your show, but
yeah,
in the midst of all the news, give us the lowdown from where you sit.
Well, obviously, where we are right now, it doesn't reflect very well on the union, and I think in general, something that should contextualize the entire conversation is we have the least leverage in pro sports for a number of reasons, and now we appear to have one of the most disjointed unions. And as evidenced by the last CBA, like not everybody is plugged in. And I think that's one of the biggest problems when not everybody's voting on a CBA. Um, that kind of signals that you have a population that's not educated on the issues. And I think that ultimately falls on the leadership. And what we saw here is evidence of why it is that way. And I'm not saying it's just been Lloyd Howell. I mean, it's probably predates Lloyd Howell and JC Treader, although I think D. Smith's a great dude and everything. And I thought he battled his ass off. At least he would battle. When you look back at what Pablo Torre uncovered with Mike Florio, the 61-page document, the not letting people know that, hey, like there's evidence of collusion inside ownership circles. If you're negotiating contracts right now, that would be kind of relevant information. The conflict of interest with the consulting firm, with private equity, like Lloyd Howell, a very checkered tenure, and most of that was news to everybody that has consumed the news the last couple of weeks, which is, I guess, my biggest problem is like there's no transparency. How he was elected, that process was kind of shadowy. JC Treader obviously is a name that's come up a lot in this whole thing, and there was an appearance of a quid pro quo type deal in electing Lloyd Howell. Bottom line is, we've turned the page, right? And I'm glad that the NFLPA acted quickly and that the players got a hold of this stuff and obviously gave a shit enough to force 2 resignations. Let them tell it. These are like, hey, I decided to walk away type deals. Like if you read the JC Treader article, it's kind of a PR piece. But I think the biggest thing is, man, we battle on the issues all the time. Like players know the issues, fans know the issues. I think it mirrors, honestly, our government too in the United States, where we all know what the issues are. We have opinions on the issues. We might not be well versed or nuanced in those issues, but we all know what we're arguing over, whether it's an 18-game season or guaranteed money or yada yada yada. These are easily digestible things. The things that players and voters in America, right, have to get better on is like, how is the mechanism that's representing us structured? Like, how is it working? Players have no idea, as evidenced by this whole process. And so when you've got an executive committee of like 10, 12 guys and they're making all these decisions, ironically, though, they're actually not making decisions. If you're well versed in this thing, they took a straw poll and voted for the other dude, not Lloyd Howell, and that was not passed on to the board. When 12 players are plugged in and the other like 1,488 of them are not, like that's a problem. That's not a labor union to me. Like a union should be about a democratic process and about representation, but instead, like it feels like it's a need to know basis type thing. And we got a bunch of players who are in the dark. So I'm hoping what comes out of this, like, is sometimes you have to rip the Band-Aid off, right? For people to realize how fucked up something is or to start caring. I hope players start paying attention, because for a couple reasons. Number one, right now, on the heels of the collusion thing, boy, would have been nice to learn about this stuff earlier in the offseason so we had a longer run on news and so we could pressure the NFL and that sort of thing. Like, we're kind of sliding in the crack in the door between now and the Hall of Fame game, which is not ideal. Um, Nonetheless, I'm glad it came out. The players need to be on the same page and they got to know who the fuck is representing them. And they have to know what the mechanism of that representation is. And I think so far, what we found out is that the PA, and this is something that a player said to me, it's become like an office in DC. It's not a place that represents the players. You know what I'm saying? Like it's just become a formality. And when you think about like what Gene Upshaw and people that came before, all these guys did, like the NFL it's a business for these billionaires, and they're always going to have leverage. When we get some leverage, we got to fucking act, and we have to be ready. We have to be mobilized, man. And so I'm hoping that's what comes out of this, man. It's kind of embarrassing. Um, but I think the problem is most players are so busy fighting for their career survival in the NFL. You don't have the leverage to sit out. The average career is short. You're under the gun, and you're not thinking about this stuff. The minute training camp starts, most players aren't thinking about this stuff. And guys who have been in the league 3 years, they don't give a fuck. Not they don't give a fuck. They're just not. They don't have any leverage to throw around. So it's got to be the leaders, and it's got to be the leaders of the PA that set the tone.
Yeah. My biggest takeaway from this was, bro, I just how far back does this shit go? Like, how deep is this rabbit hole here, right? Like, it does not feel like a one-off event. When I find out the details about the search for the NFL executive director, where they hired that search firm. They spent $500,000 on it, I believe, and Dominique Foxworth, who was a former NFLPA president during his playing days, he didn't make it past the first round interview. And they bring in some bigwig from Booz Allen Hamilton and you know what I mean, a guy who's got no football background, and they haven't had a football player be an NFL PA executive director since Gene Upshaw, like you mentioned.
Yeah.
Right. So it's like how Step and Lock have the top guys in the NFLPA been in with the owners. That's the big question that comes to mind here, because this does not feel like a one-off, bro. It feels like this is something that has been perpetuated for a while.
No question. I mean, it starts to make you think like, hey, whose team are we playing for here? Some of the people representing us were like, if you're just kind of not being aggressive, you're in effect playing for the other team, because you got to be maximum aggressive all the time just to fight owners, man. Like they got us by the balls most times. And so you got to have a fighter's mindset. You can't have like a let's not rock the boat mindset. And you certainly can't be working in conjunction with a private equity firm, one of the three firms that's being granted permission to invest in NFL teams. Like, to me, it's just the conflict of interest stuff's crazy. The vetting process seemed kind of half-hearted, and obviously everything that's happened since. And then to add a little levity to the situation, like all the stuff that came out about the strip clubs, like, and it's also funny that was the straw that broke the camel's back. Like, that was the last story. They were like, yeah, like actively fucking over players by hiding pertinent information. Like, that's not going to make the news. But he was in Tootsies for 8 hours. They picked him up at the Fort Lauderdale airport, 10:26 p.m. He was dropped off at his condo at 6 a.m. The guy posted up in Tootsies. The guy spent $2,000 in Magic City. The most hilarious thing about the Magic City part was like, they were like, and it was in withdrawals of 500, 300, 500, 2. So they just had Lloyd Howell in a headlock, bro. They were walking him to the ATM machine, and he was withdrawing NFLPA money. Sometimes all you can do is laugh. And, and the very fact that like 10 years prior, when he was at Booz Allen, and forgive me if I'm butchering some of the facts, but he went to a Manhattan strip club, and then the next morning like tried to charge it as an expense, uh and got like one of his colleagues fired, and he got like a slap on the wrist, but like he didn't learn anything from it. The only thing he learned was like, I guess I gotta hide these strip club charges. I don't report them to my higher ups. Like that to me, this guy's a bad, like, his common sense isn't great anyways. Like, you know what I'm saying? Like, what are you doing? So the whole thing is just it reflects poorly on the players, and reflects poorly on the PA. But there's a lot of really good men in the NFL who have a mind for this. You just mentioned one of them, Dominique Foxworth. He'd be a fantastic leader. It just feels like the top of the food chain's been kind of guarded. Like, like access to being the top of the food chain. And It's kind of like when you talk about running the country, like you're like
Yeah.
the it's like a self-selective process and the worst people want to do it.
Yeah.
You know,
That's right.
the best guys are in the shadows. And I'm hoping that maybe one of these dudes will step out of the shadows and be like, hey, I'm going to give up everything else I'm doing to get this thing right. And it's not going to be easy because these owners, man, they're dialed in and they're on the same page. What also was funny about the owners in this situation was in that document, you saw some of the text message conversations. It's hilarious to me that these billionaires who are supposed to be at the top of their game, they're so smart, they're so protective. They're just texting out in the open about collusion. Like, dee dee dee. Hey, hey, thanks for the Dean Spanos Bidwell conversation was hilarious to me. It was like, hey, Mike, good job on your contract. That'll really help next year when we negotiate with our quarterback. Like, and Bidwell was like, thanks, Dino. Fuck. Like, you guys are, aren't you supposed to have people like, can you send a voice memo or like meet in an alley? Like, fuck me,
Right.
you're so brazen about it. But they don't care. They think they're bulletproof. And now you hear Jerry like talking about Micah. Don't think that his tone isn't at least partially because of the fact that he's feeling like all of a sudden he's being challenged and that they are being challenged to have to spend their money a different way.
Yeah. Yeah, and the fact that the domino that set all this off was the Deshaun Watson contract, bro. Like the how are the Cleveland Browns at the center of all terrible things in NFL, bro? Like that is what they do, dog.
Bro, what if
Just a
Deshaun
special
Watson
place.
like ends up being the guy that gets us all guaranteed money and we have to be like
Right.
hero?
What a legacy.
Yeah,
Hero.
do you ever think that there will come a day where there are guaranteed contracts? Because if they do go that route, bro, those contracts are going to be so short, like 3 years max, probably.
I think the unfortunate result of guaranteed contracts would be the lack of like, and listen, I understand like in other pro sports we've seen this at like free agency and guaranteed money can yield like some pretty short stints, right? And so for fans, and we see it in college. Like, look at the NIL situation. Look at the transfer portal. Like, people are just jumping because you know, like it truly is now closer to a free market, right? And so the results of getting closer to that dream are that like teams are going to look a lot different every year, and I think that kind of sucks. I'll admit that I'm not anti-player or anti-guaranteed money, obviously, but like I do think like selfishly as a fan, you're like you want to get used to getting to know a player and like rooting for that player for the better part of a decade if you can. But you know, I don't know what the way around it would be. I do think eventually we get guaranteed money at least for some positions. You know, I think what it's going to take though is somebody really prominent's going to have to like Lamar would be the perfect guy. I hate to put pressure on Lamar because he's had to do so much in so many ways throughout his career and dealt with a lot of bullshit that he really shouldn't have to deal with. But I think this is one more thing that like heavy is the head that wears the crown, and like he'd be a timing wise and as somebody with leverage, he'd be a great guy to be like, hey, line in the sand. But we'll see. I don't know.
It does have to be a quarterback, though. I agree with you. I mean, like one of those guys, and that's sort of the dynamic, right? And I know that's played out in various NFLPA things of like the quarterbacks are almost like a, you know, obviously they're players, but they're also sort of like that's a, if the owner's talking to anyone, they're talking to the quarterback, right? And so it's like you need one of those guys, one of those really big faces to come out and say, this is what's right. It might be boring, but this is why we need to do it. And I don't care if this is America and this is how our fucking politics operate. Like, let's pay attention to a labor union issue and do the right fucking thing. You know, of all the sports, should obviously be the one that has guaranteed contracts.
What's always interesting to me is just how like knee jerk, and I talked about this like as a population, generally what you see, and maybe this is just being online, and that's the problem. Like being online has jaded all these guys on the screen, but like most people you assume are going to knee jerk side with the corporations over the workforce in America right now, which is crazy to me. you know, and a lot of those people are part of the workforce, right? Like, and I understand that like it's not a very like people aren't going to feel sorry for NFL players because their game checks are like some of them in the millions, right? But they still are the labor force. And the people that you are de facto siding with as fans, a lot of times it's the billionaires. And I think part of that is because you don't want to see the game get shaken up and you like things the way they were and people are afraid to change. But part of it is just because people don't want to see players get the bag, which is fucking weird to me.
Yep.
And it's got a tinge of something else in it. But it definitely is, it's definitely an odd thing. And you see it in general, like it just seems kind of in vogue to like to side with the ruling class, man. And everything is class, man. You know, you talk about this stuff and whether these two subpopulations are like rich people or not, like it's a class thing. It's ownership class versus a workforce. And so like
Yeah.
I wish more fans would be like, dude, like they would recognize that these are the guys that are risking their health to give us some entertainment. I know they're paid really handsomely. And it sucks if I'm a plumber and I'm sitting at home and I'm like, bro, I work really hard and I wish I had NFL talent. But I'll tell you who's got more in common with you than a billionaire. It's fucking NFL player. Side with the fucking players.
That's what I don't understand, and obviously we could talk about that on a national scale outside of sports. I don't understand why the imagination does not take you to identifying with the player against Jerry fucking Jones. Like, you know what I mean? Like in any job, like that's just a really easy leap to make, in my opinion.
Because not all the players, listen, not all the players are like exorbitantly rich, dude. Like I know a lot of guys who are living check to check that played in the NFL, and the knee jerk reaction by these same people would be like, well, he didn't handle his money right. And that's not the case. It's
Right.
just that like the NFL has a lot of variability in how much money guys make and how the guys live. Like the NBA, I imagine everybody's in pretty good shape. But like when I played in the NFL for the Rams, like there were a number of guys that were staying at the extended stay. That's how they were living. They were living at the extended stay, and they, you know, it wasn't like they come in town and they can even afford to grab a place to, you know, and rent a place like that. The description of the job for a lot of the league is, you know, I'm going to go as far as my next opportunity takes me and then figure it out after that. And then like post football, like there are a lot of guys that are living check to check and they got families and they have people to support. So, and they're also like, listen, it is one sport where it affects the length of your life, dude. Like I don't know how long I'm gonna live, but I'm pretty sure it would be longer if I didn't play football. Like that, there's something to be said for that. And when you're a workforce and you're looking for a little bit of guaranteed compensation, I don't think it's the craziest thing in the world.